the more time that you are holding the highest bid, the more pressure there is on everybody else.
The buzz, the nervousness, the anticipation, everything.
They've got a job to do. It's no longer an auction, it's a negotiation.
Going once, going twice, sold. It's the magic words that all prospective homeowners want to hear on auction day. But being the highest bidder at auction requires more than just having the healthiest bank account. Welcome to Real Talk, realestate.com.au's property news podcast. Today we're discussing the secrets to the auction game, giving both buyers and sellers the insider tips on how to come out on top. Joining me to discuss it all is buyer's agent Cate Bakos, who has been helping buyers at auction for 21 years, and Andy Reid, one of Australia's most well-known auctioneers with 14 years of experience selling homes. Cate, Andy, thanks for coming on. Firstly, I just want to paint a picture of what auctions are looking like around Australia at the moment. So for the past 12 months, realestate.com.au data shows that 111,712 properties have gone to auction. It's got an average clearance rate of 60%. So we've seen 28,294 properties pass in, and we've seen 21,033 properties sold just prior to auction day. Andy, let's start with you, given you are the auctioneer among us. Mm-hmm. Is there one property type that's kind of coming to auction more than others, or are you seeing every property class imaginable?
I'm seeing a really good cross-section. I am seeing a heck of a lot more townhomes at the minute in Monash, in the city of Monash, so Mount Waverley, Glen Waverley. There was a real explosion of townhomes that came onto the market all at a very, very similar time, which caused a bit of fun in amongst the buying population. I'm seeing a really, really good variety of stock that's giving auctions a go. It's more of a symptom of the buyer sentiment than it is the property type. I don't think there's any one property type right now where you go, right, that has to go to auction. It's very much a case of what the heck can we do to get buyers off the fence and into the game.
Cate, do you think that there was a bit of a dip in the auction scene post-COVID, and has that corrected itself now?
Yeah, there was a dip, and one of the key reasons for that was we had less stock on market, and it was fueled by a few things. A lot of people were forced to make decisions during COVID. We saw a lot of activity, and what you tend to find is once people have made a big decision, whether they're loving it or they're not sure about it, they'll probably sit tight. So that's what we saw. People sat tight. We also had a chicken and egg phenomenon happening after lockdown. What I mean is people won't make a purchase decision until they've found the property for them. And if there's not a lot of stock on the market, then they're not making a decision, then they're not selling a property. So we had that awkward cycle where we didn't have a lot of vendors listing their properties because they didn't want to sell and then get caught out and not have a property to move to.
How many clients are you dealing with at the moment? Does the number tend to increase based on how competitive the market is?
The number increases until I'm at capacity.
Luxurious position to be in, right?
Certainly if I'm measuring my leads or people that are contacting me, prospects, that tends to spike when people feel they need the help of a buyer's agent. And that is directly proportional to stock levels, unfortunately. And when we've had a really tough run like we saw in 2021, when people were getting outbid and they were just really struggling to manage to secure a property, they were turning to us to either be, magic genies at auction or to find them off markets, which is another lucrative kind of buzzword that a lot of buyers agents use. And there are off markets out there, but there are a lot of bad ones as well. So I think the secret to dealing with a really tough environment where it's very competitive is you've got to move with the times, recognise what sort of capital growth you're experiencing in your city and overlay that when you're doing your analysis so that you have the right budget.
So do some clients simply engage you to bid at auction and they might do all the legwork prior?
Sometimes I've got an acquisition service, which is quite different from the full search service. That means the client's doing all the searching.
Yep.
They come to me with a property that they love. But invariably, they haven't done the due diligence on that property. So they might not know what it's worth. They don't understand how to go about getting it in the best way possible so that it's as painless and the price is as low as they could possibly muster. And due diligence is a big thing. In answer to the question, yes, I've got acquisition clients on a very regular basis.
Andy, when do you advise a seller to go to auction?
When I was an agent, bizarrely, I didn't actually lean towards auction in any particular way as opposed to any other process. I was very evenly spread in terms of which process I used for which property. So I've not got a bias towards auction, ironically. But what I will say is that you've got to pay attention to the market, not the property. So, for example, right now, I'm seeing so many fence sitters when it comes to buyers who are there. There's enough buyers out there, there's enough money out there, but there's not enough urgency to make them do anything. And therefore, I would be recommending to go to an auction or a deadline-based marketing process purely to try and create some urgency and get buyers to do something.
Cate, what's your preference for your clients?
When I've got a nervous first home buyer, they might not want to go to auction. They don't like burning building inspection money. They don't like not being able to be subject to finance. They're very nervous. When in terms of the buyers that I work with, if they're really nervous about going to auction, then I will try and either target private sales. You don't want to cut yourself out of the auction market because the good properties do go to auction. So, that's a conversation I have to have with them. The other types of situations where I might want a private sale is if someone definitely needs conditions in their contract. So let's say their finance is really flimsy and they've got a very high loan to value ratio and it would be harmful for them to have what we call a valuation shortfall. That means that the lender won't give them the entire amount that they need if the bank valuation comes in underneath what they've paid for it. So there are a few very sensitive circumstances where I'll avoid auction. But I love an auction for its transparency. A buyer could never turn around and say, do you think they were bluffing? Have they really got another offer? I mean, you're standing there in the crowd and you're looking at the other buyers and it's all there in front of them. It's also a great measure of social proof. And it's a terrible thing, social proof, because if the property passes in, the clients sometimes say, we're not sure if we really want it because no one else put their hand up. But when there's lots of people bidding, it definitely proves that it's a popular asset.
What is the auction atmosphere like? The buzz, the nervousness, the anticipation, everything?
Oh, it's great. I love it. And I can spot bidders starting to arrive at the site. Usually the property's open for half an hour and you can spot their nerves a mile away. When someone's walking on the footpath towards the auction, I can tell if they're bidding or not. When you're getting closer to the bell ringing, which is just before the auction starts, people have absolutely transformed into two camps. I'm just here to have a watch and I think I might be bidding. And you sometimes see people lose their nerves so badly that they don't bid. If you're unsure about how to spot the nerves, you can also see the agents going over to people. And they're probably saying something along the lines of, your 90-day settlement's approved, or I'm just checking that you're happy with the contract, or we can make that change. And so that's always a bit of a hint.
Because they've done a lot of prior speaking with these people.
Even if they've just arrived that day and said, we're interested in bidding, but can we have a very long or a very short settlement? The agent will rush inside and check all of that off and come out. If they've just walked up, they haven't done all of the due diligence. They haven't had a building inspection. They probably haven't had a contract review. There might be issues, not significant issues, but points that are lost on that property because of some of these compromises that your fellow bidder isn't aware of.
I love it when professionals get involved because it means that I get to have fun on a professional level. There's curveballs get thrown like that just to make everybody aware, obviously because they just wanted to clarify. Balls, is it? It's wanting to make sure that everybody knows that there's an issue with this thing, right? We talk about homework. I can't sell what I don't know. I just assume that there's going to be some smart Alec over here
that
will try and throw a spanner in the works of my game.
What's the atmosphere like from your opinion though? Like you're on the other side of it, Cate.
It doesn't matter if they've done it once or if it's their first auction that they're selling, or if it's their 10th. Every single human gets nervous. If through nothing else, public judgment, even if the money isn't really that significant to them, they'll still get nervous. And that's absolutely fair because it shows me that they actually care. On my side as the auctioneer, one of the things that I try and help agents do is to try not to show any level of desperation in their actions and so on and so forth. I can't help it but smile whenever I talk about auctions because I just find myself to be stupidly lucky that I found something that I genuinely love to do and get paid for it.
Cate, I know that you actually don't let your bidders bid for themselves. How do you go about preparing them for auction day?
I don't let them stand with me. And part of the reason for that is I don't want anyone to be reading them and then interpreting what I'm about to do. And the agents aren't their competition. The other bidders are. And if other bidders have professional bidders, then a professional bidder will spot nerves and they'll know how to tackle that and how to bid against them. So for that reason, I like them to stand away from me, but I also don't want them making any emotional decisions about money after we've had a conversation about money the day before in the stone cold light of day. We haven't had to talk about getting a motive or doing something that could lead to problems when they're under pressure. So we set our limit, and then I have them standing in the crowd. I tell them to grab a brochure, because most bidders don't grab a brochure. They've already seen the property a few times. They've probably scribbled a floor plan on the back of the brochure. So when they've grabbed a brochure, that will throw anyone off the game in terms of wondering if they're bidders.
Because it makes them look like they're new.
Yeah, they're just having a look.
Yeah,
Unless
yeah.
they're holding it up to their face.
Yes.
Why?
No, they
Because
might be
they're
hiding their
panicking.
face.
They're almost hiding,
it's to
or-
hide their
or they're
facial
whispering,
expressions.
or they're doing so. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I'll ping that.
Well, we try and prepare them by explaining how it's definitely going to start.
Yeah.
That's the only bit I can predict. This is how it will start. This is where I'll probably stand. If you see me moving across the crowd, it means that I've identified someone who I think is a stronger bidder than the person I originally thought I was facing, because I've got to read people and determine, with whatever intel I can get my hands on as well, who is my likely end opponent. Who will I be climbing into the ring with and having a battle with? And so I'll stand where I've got direct eye contact with them. So I prepare my clients to recognise if I'm moving across the crowd, it's because I've got a new player I need to eyeball. And I'll also talk them through some of the tricks that I might have to pull out of my bag of tricks. But obviously we don't know until that split second where you're dealing with someone, you're reading the body language, you're getting the cue, and you're thinking, right, this is not a time to throw out a big bid. I've actually got to slow this down. Or I might do annoying little one bids, but I'll be really fast with them. So as soon as they go to say their bid, as soon as their mouth opens, I'm straight back in another one. And that can throw someone as well.
How do you size up people and I guess work out what do you think their max is?
I can definitely tell from body language when someone's got to their max that they had predetermined. They're then in an uncharted territory because they want to break the promise that they made to each other about the maximum bid, and they want to stretch and go over it. And so it becomes painful. Their bidding is no longer the same style because they've already gone past their limits. So they start to look at each other and they're trying to discuss it on the fly. They're having a strategy meeting in the middle of an auction with 100 people looking at them. And you can see when that bid that they were comfortable with is eclipsed and they're no longer comfortable, but they really want the property. But before the auction, sometimes I've got a little bit of intel. I might know that they missed out on something last week because the agent might have let slip.
Andy, from the other side, are you able to kind of tell who's going to win?
Every time you think you know, you don't. There was one, and it was really early on in my auctioneering life. Agent didn't really pay any attention to him, and out of nowhere, this bloke just slowly puts his hand up like that. And I'm like,
Where'd you come from?
Where the heck did you come from?
Yeah.
And he obliterated him.
Yeah.
Absolutely annihilated him. So you can try and work it out, but I've always been of the ethos of always expect the unexpected, because then you're always prepared. If you try and work it out, you generally end up getting proved wrong.
Kate, what if a house passes in? What's your strategy then?
You might think that you know what the reserve is likely to be, but you can bet if it passes in, the agent will probably try on a higher reserve because they've got a job to do. It's no longer an auction. It's a negotiation, and they need to try and get you as high as they possibly can. And a passing can be a great thing because the vendor is very emotional. It's their auction day. That's probably the day they're most vulnerable. They just want it done. So you can drive a hard bargain, but you've also got to watch the clock because if it's a busy Saturday, your auctioneer might have to fly and you don't want to be stuck there with a non-result and then the opportunity is over and they open it up to other buyers. It requires you being very, very familiar with your values. I always have all of my comparable sales analysis printed and in my bag. So I can sit there and run through everything with the agent if we're having an argument about price. And I usually find that science prevails. Once you're talking about block sizes and orientation and condition and bedroom count and streetscape and quality, they're not going to argue with logic. So that's the best way that you can arm yourself. But if you've got an opportunity and you can sniff that, I can sniff desperation a mile away, of course I'll try it on. That's the opportunity that I've got. That's my job, to come in with a price tag that's really pleasing. So a passing can be a great opportunity, but you have to remember not to blow it. If you're too far off, if you lowball it, if you annoy the agents, if you offend the vendor, you can miss that opportunity and then it's no longer an opportunity that's just exclusively for me. It's opened up to the rest of the crowd and that can be a nightmare.
Where do buyers go wrong?
They will go wrong because they saw the level that the property passed in and they assume that because no one else wanted to buy it, that's where the market value sits. And that's a naive thing to assume because you might have been the only person who was prepped to bid and buy that day. And it just means that other buyers weren't at the auction. And if, let's say, for example, the reserve is $1 million and the property passed in at 920, you'd be making a big mistake if it's worth $1 million to hold your offer at 920 and lose the opportunity to buy it. The auctioneer and the agents might then decide to flip it to a private sale and they'll put $1 million as the asking price on a private sale campaign on REA. And then that night, everyone's sitting there scrolling, oh, wow, that didn't sell. $1 million, is that all? I thought it might have gone higher. And all of a sudden it's sold.
Andy, where do you think buyers go wrong from the auction perspective?
They don't do anything. So I had this one in One Turner South. It was only a few weeks ago. And the agent was told specifically by at least 5 buyers that they're keen, right? So he's rubbing his hands, thinking we're on. Call for the opening bid, nothing. They're either waiting for each other or, as one buyer actually said to me during that auction, I'm waiting for it to pass in so I can get it cheap. I actually said back, I said, that is the stupidest thing I think I've ever heard. When you look at the people that are here, it passed in at 1.61. Within 5 minutes, 4 bedrooms, 3 of the bedrooms had different buyers in them, all wanting to make an offer, right? If one of those buyers had have cared to put their hand up and just match my vendor bid at 1.61, they'd have probably been able to buy it around 1.65 and it ended up selling for 1.7 because they just didn't get involved. Public speaking is like second to death in the things that people fear the most. So doing something like that in public, in front of everyone, is going to make people panic, right? But I'm telling you now, is that ego worth the 50 grand check just signed off within 10 minutes?
What are your top tips for someone to drop the hammer and win?
There's 3 sort of key elements. Speed is one. Coming back really quickly is really important. It's kind of like, those timed games of chess where you got the 2 little clocks on the side and then they make a move and they hit the button and the timer starts running on everyone, on the other person. It's exactly that. The more time that you are holding the highest bid, the more pressure there is on everybody else, right? Could be volume. If you crack a bid out nice and loud, then it can show a level of authority sometimes. It can work the opposite way when you're blatantly just messing about. Then the little middle-aged lady across there just absolutely destroys you, right? And things like tonality and things like that play a huge part. The numbers, in many cases, are secondary to the psychology of the whole thing. Like, you can talk numbers all you want, right? And when it comes to after the auction, logic is exactly the way you need to play. But during that auction, if you're not aware of what is actually going on and you focus too much on your numbers, you're going to lose.
Cate, what are your biggest tips for being the winner at auction day?
You've got to do your homework, know what the property's worth. You've got to have a walkaway price. And that walkaway price should be a little bit more than what the property is worth if you really love it. And if the property is an infrequent property, so if it's very special and it's rare and the chances of it coming up again, unlike that, coming up again is low, that might influence that little bit of buffer that you put on top of where you think market value sits. My biggest advice at auction is to talk to the agents all the way up to auction so that you're getting as much intel as you can and be the person that they like. They'll help you out. They'll give you some information. And don't assume that they'll be closed-lipped and won't tell you anything. You can ask them how many bidders do you expect on the day, how many building inspections have you had done, how many contracts have been requested. That will give you a few really good building blocks to understand how many you could be up against. And when the auction starts, don't focus on anything else other than what the auctioneer is saying and what your opponent bidders are doing, because auctioneers all have different words they use and different things that signal what you can expect next. So if Andy said at the start of an auction, this is a no reserve auction, I won't be going inside, don't wait for the halftime show because he might pass the property in or knock it down with you thinking that he's about to go inside and then come out and say, all right, now we're in the final stretch. Sometimes there isn't that act two. And other little things that you've got to listen out for are signals that you're on the market or that you're close to being on the market. And they all have different sayings, don't you? Say,
Yeah.
This person's holding the keys or we're playing for keeps. There's lots of different
God.
sayings. And if you're not sure, don't be proud about it, but just ask, excuse me, are we on the market? Or, can I just confirm something? If you're polite about it, they'll totally support you.
We're at time, so thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you've had fun.
We have indeed.
Oh, it's been fantastic. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for joining me. This has been Real Talk. For your weekly fix, please follow wherever you listen to your podcasts and tune in next time for more real questions, news and insights on the topics that matter most from realestate.com.au, Australia's #1 address in property. All information provided is general advice and opinion based on current market conditions. These opinions should not be treated as investment advice. Always obtain advice based on your individual circumstances.
Real Talk acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, air and community. We pay our respects to elders past and present.